Hi folks, hope you're all good. This video is about my politico-economic system called equal groups. I've made a website with a description of it written in text form, but I thought I'd do a video as well about it. I'm going to be reading from the website I've made, but hopefully I won't just be dryly reading it. I'll try and breathe a little bit of life into it. We'll see how that goes. Okay, so equal groups is a system under which society is divided into groups of people of between 50 and 100 people. Those in one group must have their homes adjacent to one another, and 75% of people's contact with others must be with those in the same group. Each group is forced to be equal with every other group in terms of 1. Political power, and 2. Preference satisfaction. A level is chosen for each of those two quantities, which no group is allowed to deviate from. Political power, what is that? It is defined as the control a group has over things that matter in people's lives, including things that happen within their group. So it's a general power thing. Some people I've talked to are slightly confused what I mean by power, and it's a bit like when you say, who's the most powerful person in the country? Probably the prime minister or president or someone. And who's more powerful than someone else, than other people, then we could say like bosses of companies are more powerful than your average person. So this is the kind of power I'm talking about. The other quantity that I equalize between the groups is preference satisfaction, as I just mentioned, and this is defined as the percentage of a group's members' emotional wants that are satisfied at a given time. So if you imagine all your desires, your wants, what percentage of those are being satisfied, kind of added up for the whole of one of these groups of between 50 and 100 people, and that is the group's level of preference satisfaction. Some groups will work as a part of an agency called equality regulation. This agency will inspect all other groups periodically. If a group is found to be above the standard level in terms of political power, it will be forced to yield powers to other groups. If it's found to be above the standard level in terms of satisfaction, it will have its pay reduced. More about pay in a moment. People are not allowed individually or collectively to treat those in another group in a way that's likely to leave one individual in that group with greater power or satisfaction than another. 3 examples of such forbidden activities are as follows. 1. If a person asks to be served by a particular person in the group, if the group is, say, running a shop. Example 2, if society runs a qualification system in which individuals who provide a certain service must have passed a certain exam, etc. Example 3 of a forbidden activity is if society runs a private property system governing land and property within a group. So, in a little bit of overview here, I'm trying to make a very equal society, equal in terms of these two quantities I've just mentioned, political power and preference satisfaction. But I believe the a little group of people of 50 to 100 people will be egalitarian. But I'm a little bit worried that if they get pressure from outside, they won't be egalitarian. So I think if they're not pressured from outside if the people outside the group aren't creating differences between the people within the group will tend to divide things up and divide the power up reasonably egalitarianly, not that that's quite a word, amongst themselves. So let me read on. Oh, you may be wondering how we measure these things. My answer to that is we can't perfectly measure something like preference satisfaction or political power, but we can roughly do so. So I think if, as I was saying earlier, if you have a boss of a company, that boss is pretty obviously more powerful than their subordinates. Likewise with the president. So basically, there aren't going to be any boss kind of groups control other groups in an obvious way anyway. And with preference satisfaction, there's not going to be one group sort of eating caviar every day and the other group sort of eating stale bread or whatever. It's going to be there's not going to be any obvious differences of that kind of level. So an individual is allowed to move from one group to another as long as the group they're joining has less than 100 people. Groups are not allowed to deny membership to new members or to give worse treatment to those who have joined more recently. To make them less appealing, groups in sought-after locations would have to endure worse quality houses and or lower incomes. So in a way, we have a kind of third equality, which is equality of desirability of groups. Since people are allowed to freely move between the groups, we've got to basically make the groups equally desirable, which I think will be pretty similar to the equality of satisfaction, or maybe not identical. Each group will receive an unconditional income from the state, which is enough to survive on, but not survive comfortably. On top of this, each group will be paid for dissatisfaction it chooses to incur, for example, from work done. This is consistent with the rule of equal satisfaction. This payment also comes from the state. Groups are not allowed to get income from customers, other groups, or individuals. Although groups will often take customers' money, for example, if they run a shop, this money must be immediately surrendered to the state. Groups can have savings and property, for example, a yacht or jewelry, to give some slightly rich examples. The state will tax groups' wealth, however, at increasing rates the larger this wealth gets. The rates will be such that most groups will find holding, say, more than £100,000 per person wouldn't be worth doing. So I don't want to ban groups being wealthy, but if we tax enough people, there won't be huge differences in wealth, which I think would be a bit of a better situation. Each group decides for itself how to distribute its money and resources to people within it. A group may choose to be egalitarian, inegalitarian, or anything in between. It may also do all, some, or none of its consumption collectively. If it does all of its consumption collectively, it will be like a communist collective with no individual money or income. All land and property will ultimately be owned by the state, but most of the time be controlled by groups, or where groups choose it by individuals. Which groups and services get made and at what price they get sold will mostly be decided by the groups providing and distributing the services and goods. However, the state may override any of these decisions if it wishes to. It is likely that most goods will be sold at the clearing price, which is the level at which goods leave the shelves at the same rate as the shells are refilled. So that is the overview of equal groups. Now I'm going to move on to talk about lawmaking and government. Let's imagine, for the sake of simplicity, that the whole world is living under the equal group system. The world would be one sovereign state and also be divided into substates that make certain decisions. A substate's population can be anything above 1,000 people. Both the world state and substates would be governed by direct democracy. Ordinary people would perform all the tasks that politicians perform in a representative democracy. Let us first look at how the world state would operate, and then look at the substates. Okay, so the world state first. Every 30 years, a given group will do a 15-week stint as part of the world government. This means that at any given time, 1% of groups will be doing their stint. When they are working as the world government, the groups will be paid and won't be expected to do their normal work. There are 4 types of world governing group. Their names are proposal groups, comparison groups, approval groups, and command groups. At any given point in time, a random quarter of world governing groups will be acting as each of these 4 types. Proposal groups propose changes to the law. Comparison groups rate these proposals, and approval groups vote for or against the most promising proposals to approve them into law or otherwise. Command groups deal with the day-to-day decisions affecting the world. World laws also come in 2 types: compulsory laws and optional laws. Compulsory laws apply to everyone in the world. Optional laws only apply if one's substate has decided to adopt them. Substates cannot freely write laws of their own, just accept or otherwise optional laws set at world level, while obeying all compulsory laws that the world sets. Let's discuss the process of making world laws in more detail. Firstly, proposal groups. At the end of their 15 weeks, anyone serving in a proposal group can propose a change to world laws. Anyone who doesn't wish to submit a proposal of their own may second a proposal of someone else in the group. A proposal may have any number of seconders. During their time, those in a proposal group may do their own research and consult experts outside the group. Each proposal will specify whether it is intended to be a compulsory or an optional law. Proposal groups also do another job during their 15 weeks. They categorize the proposals that have just been submitted by other groups. For a certain amount of time, they read lists of these submissions, randomly put into groups of 3 proposals. For each group of 3 proposals, they must identify the one proposal that they think is the odd one out topic-wise. From this, all proposals end up in a big list with proposals on similar topics following one another. Okay, so that's the proposal groups dealt with. Apologies if this is like too much detail. I may be getting a little bit dry. I have got through most of this now, so let me continue. Comparison groups. The list just mentioned is passed on to the comparison groups. Each comparison group is randomly assigned 2 portions of the list to look at, representing 5 times the output of the average proposal group. If each proposal group produces 40 proposals on average, then each of the 2 portions would be of 100 proposals. At the end of their time, each person serving on a comparison group ranks all the 200-ish proposals they've been given according to how much they would like them to get adopted. From this ranking, a best proposal is produced. As with proposal groups, those serving can do their own research and consult experts outside the group. If the details are kind of glazing over you at this point, just a rough idea is these get these proposal groups that make a bunch of proposals. They end up in lists. Comparison groups just compare some bunches of portions of these lists and pick the sort of best ones. And then the process moves on to the approval groups, which I will now talk about. Approval groups also serve for 15 weeks, during which they look at the most successful proposal coming out of the comparison group process. At the end of their time, each person serving in an approval group submits a simple yes or no to the proposal. As with the other groups, those serving can do their own research and consult experts outside the group. Each week, 1/15 of proposal, comparison, and approval juries start/end their time. So each week a proposal may be approved or otherwise. That concludes my description of world lawmaking. Now let's look at the structure of command groups which deal with the day-to-day decisions of society. Okay, command groups. There are command groups of 5 different admin levels, supposing this is a world system. The lowest, most local administrative divisions are of 300,000 people. That's like a local borough here in London. The highest is of the whole world. Each admin level has 13 times the number of people as the level below it. Various statistics for the admin levels are collected in a table on my website. So I'm making a list. I'm not going to read out all the figures in this table, but it basically shows all the different sizes of these divisions, the 5 levels of admin divisions in this supposed world system. Okay, let me talk about substates, which are a little bit like countries, I guess. Anyone may propose a change to sub-state borders. If 5% of the people who will change sub-states under the proposal sign a petition, it goes to a referendum of the whole population of this area. A straight majority of those who vote will put the change into effect. A person is said to change sub-states if either most of their fellow sub-state citizens cease to be so after the change, or if after the change most of their fellow sub-state citizens are people who weren't fellow citizens before the change. Okay, that's a bit confusing and technical. Roughly speaking, a bunch of people in a local area can decide to move the border of their local sub-state. Let me move on. If a particular sub-state has a population greater than 100,000, it will take the place of one of the administrative levels in the command group table, which I just mentioned. If the sub-state's population is lower than this, it will become an extra 6th level. So these sub-states will slot into the kind of world kind of hierarchy of these groups. Not hierarchy in the sense of more powerful, but hierarchy in terms of areas within areas within areas. Okay. If a sub-state's population is over 1 million, its lawmaking system will be similar to the world's, utilizing a further 1% of people and running parallel to it. So, if we've got enough people, we can do this similar system to the one I've just been describing. For sub-states smaller than this system, we'll have a different system which I call we rule. We rule, capital W, small e, capital R, small u, small l, small e. Under we rule, each group chooses if and when they want to serve as part of the government. To avoid decisions being skewed towards the type of group that might be more likely to serve, votes will be weighted towards those who are underrepresented. So if groups that serve tend to be left-wing, then right-wingers will get a greater voting power in the decisions. Likewise, if they tend to be male or young or intelligent, etc. So, as I just said, a substate, if it's a bit small, we can't really have this draw up random people very easily. So, that would be probably a bit too much of a burden on the average person. So we can make it an optional thing, but to make up for the fact that certain kinds of people will probably put themselves forward, we'll have a kind of weighting system where people who are more unusual in their attributes get more weight, more votes, basically, or groups rather who have those kind of attributes, I believe. Okay. Now a little bit of okay, so that's finished the discussion of how the political system works. Now let me talk about incentives to work, which is something you guys might be thinking is a flaw with this system. So one criticism that might be leveled at the equal group system is that it leaves citizens with little incentive to work. The guaranteed equality of power and satisfaction between groups, it might be contended, would lead each group to freeload on the work of others, drastically reducing overall output. I don't think this criticism succeeds, however, as there would be no benefit to a group from shirking. If a group chooses the satisfaction of not working, it will be penalized with the removal of satisfaction that comes with higher income. With either option, working or not working, leading to the same amount of satisfaction, I think that a sense of moral duty would swing groups towards working. If you accept my answer here, your criticism might shift to saying that people would work, but they wouldn't work efficiently. It's true, the groups that lie on a bed of nails would get as much income as those who do something useful. But I don't think this would lead groups to lie on beds of nails. People prefer their sacrifices to be for something useful, I believe. These answers are, however, somewhat speculative. The system has never been tried, and until it is, it will be impossible to be sure how much working or shirking would occur. Okay, I'm nearly finished now. There's two more issues to talk about. One is the education system, which I'll mention briefly. And finally, I'll talk about transitioning from our current system to the equal group system. Again, it will be a reasonably brief discussion. So, education. As stated above, qualifications, it's a video, so I should say, as stated some moments ago, qualification systems are banned in the equal groups system. I don't know if you remember that from earlier in the video. However, people of all ages can still learn things they want to learn. Most learning would take place within one's group. Each group would probably have a few dedicated to minding and educating children. Older kids would be able to apprentice at the main occupation of the group. Also, most groups might offer work experience to children and adults from other groups. This might typically run for somewhere between an hour per week or a day per week. Okay, that's my thoughts about education. Okay, lastly, transition to equal groups. The transition to equal groups would require most people to move houses to be adjacent to people working in the same industry. The moves could all take place in 1 week using temporarily commandeered vans, as furniture could be left with their properties in the first instance. Actually, I didn't mention this on the site, but I did look up that the UK has 4 million vans, so I don't believe all of those are being put to urgent use. So a van for would be enough stuff to move to a different property. At least in the first instance, it was enough for day-to-day living stuff. So, okay. Equal groups can be rolled out across the world within 5 years. Once the process is complete, every adult human would have the right to move to any other group across the world. The reason for the 5-year process is to manufacture mobile homes for those living in inadequate housing in many of the poor parts of the world. Without equalizing housing in this way, large numbers in the poor areas might immediately migrate to the rich areas, destabilizing the whole system. Over a longer time frame, permanent, high-quality homes can be built for everyone. That concludes my discussion on the website. What I probably should add to the website, and I'll probably mention here very quickly, is why. Why do the systems completely different to our current system? What's the advantage? And to briefly summarize, I would say that competition is really dangerous. Right now in the world, we're all competing with one another, and I think that's going to lead to probably dangerous AI within a few decades, but also things like pollution and resource overuse of resources. So they're probably the main thoughts. It's also poverty right now is pretty horrific. People are dying right now of hunger, and this will sort that out. But even within like societies where people aren't starving, I think competition is pretty nasty. I think it's massively overrated. We've all been brought up thinking like a bit of competition's good, but is that actually true? Do we do good work if we do it for the reason of competition? I think if we're not competing, we just are compensated for our efforts, we will be pretty rational about what work actually needs to be done and what doesn't, and what is beneficial, what is not. Those are my thoughts anyway. Okay, if you've been listening for 27.5 minutes, thank you so much, and please get in touch if you're interested in joining me in promoting these ideas. All the best.